hang up and listen to what you have to say. I think that our schools definitely need improvement, and if we can take them back to some ardor and that the children can learn, that's the most important thing. Number one, I think it would be wonderful if there was some type of dress code. I think our students, when they're shown on TV, the hallways or whatever, it's not, people react to how they're dressed. And I think it would improve the attitude of the whole school building if students and teachers, of course, but I think the teachers are probably fine, but if the students had a dress code. Number two, discipline. And I realize it's very difficult with parents today to enforce discipline. But I think you can spend $1 million, $1 billion on new programs, on a new building, blah, blah, blah. But if there is no discipline, there is no learning. And so anyway, that's all I have to say. Again, welcome to Quincy, and I'll hang up and listen to any comments that you have.
Thank you very much, caller. Discipline was my number one question, so she took my thunder away, and that's okay. I laughed out loud because I'm sorry. I think sometimes what people wear as professional staff members of the Quincy Public Schools is quite deficit. But let's talk about discipline. Discipline is a huge issue in the classrooms. You talk to any teacher, and this is a small town, so we're all going to know people that teach in the Quincy Public Schools. We're going to see them out in the grocery stores, at our churches, swimming pool. They're going to be everywhere. And it always comes back to discipline, lack of control in the classroom, lack of behavior objectives that students will agree with. I know that Scott Stone is working with the other board members on a new discipline code. What do you think needs to happen with discipline to children in the classroom?
Well, first, thank the caller for that question. Yeah, it's interesting, Mary, what you just said. We have 7 members on board that are very consistent in their views about discipline in Quincy Public Schools. We have a subcommittee working out of our committee that's simply working and addressing those specific issues. And she mentioned something about dress code. Dress code has been in a conversation. We've also talked from this committee. We're just in the process of reviewing all of the parent handbooks and the discipline guides from each of the levels, and they're reporting back to this committee. From that, we will have a recommendation for the board to make for the public to hear of how we're proceeding with our discipline. The other part of this is, what did she mention? I lost my train of thought there.
Dress code and discipline.
Not the dress. With discipline. Here's the other thing about the discipline committee that she made a comment about, that one thing that we're looking at also is putting a little more responsibility back on parents. It's one thing for schools to be able to do a certain amount of this discipline, but it also falls back on the parents to be those role models, to set those boundaries, to set those guidelines. And so it's going to be the community and the schools working together to establish those disciplinary boundaries.
Well, but there, of course, leads into my next question, which is the number one thing that my friends, or just associates, I wouldn't even say my friends, because don't go around looking at all my friends going, what did you say? But discipline in the classroom, the number one problem. Number two problem, home environment, which no teacher can control. Coming to school tired, hungry, disheveled, unable to learn, crackhead mom, prison-bound dad. They slept on a couch last night because they're homeless.
Right.
These overwhelming social issues, and then we throw them into a 4th grade room and say, teach them to read, show them the geography. It's almost impossible. What is the answer to something like that? Because you say discipline, going back on the parents, some of these parents are pretty undisciplined.
That is difficult because what people don't understand is in a regular classroom, you're going to have all the scenarios you just described. It's difficult for a classroom teacher because they become the mom, the grandparent, the father in some instances, the counselor. They're working with every kid. And truthfully, some of the kids come into our classroom, this on a priority list, that really learning would be number 10. They have too many other issues. Where am I going to eat today? If it wasn't for something being provided at school, would I be able to eat? What about when I go home? What type of environment am I going into? I have to tell you, in my brief time here, I attended a meth workshop, and I was taken back. I was very surprised by what was described as a meth lab and how easy it is to create a meth lab and all of the ingredients that go into it. And I'm thinking, I start asking serious questions like, okay, if that's the situation and this is occurring, well, what about our kids? What about our kids who are in schools? Are they coming from meth parents? What about the environment? And so those questions are continuing. It is a social issue, and it's not just a social issue for Quincy, it's a national social issue that we're having to address. You know, something we're going to have to look down the way, and of course funding is always an issue, is what kind of services can we provide that will assist students, such as counselors in our schools or increased social workers, or we're talking about increasing our communication with the city as far as what services are out there, but unfortunately the city is in the same situation we are, and then every time we seem to get cut, well, the funding cuts and programs are discontinued. So teaching is not easy. It is not easy whatsoever, and I commend all of our educators in Quincy because they put in a great deal of time and they really care about their kids and do everything they can to make at least the 8 hours or 7 hours they have them in a given day and make those very productive.
And I think you've really kind of encapsulated the problem, and it doesn't matter if Stephen Cobb is the superintendent of schools or who is this. You've come to the meth capital of the United States. Welcome.
Thank you.
Super huge problem here. Social problems abound in our children. Poverty level. We've got basically 50% of the kids are showing up for school that come from impoverished homes.
Correct.
And so these social problems are not going to go away unless somehow as a community we can tackle them. And I don't know what the answer to that problem is. So you've got a big job ahead of you. And discipline, let's talk a little bit about, go back to discipline in the classroom.
Sure.
Okay. I'll give you several scenarios. We'll take a sixth grader, because I have to say that Baldwin School seems to be the apex of all things unholy in the Quincy Public Schools. They teach them to be sweet and kind in 7 Habits K through 3, and they walk out of little Berrien and Ellington with little halos around their heads. And somehow, by the time 6 months has elapsed at Baldwin, this is it's unbelievable what has formed in a mass down there. It's just an ungodly amalgamation of young attitudes. So teacher's in the classroom, a child smacks another student, spits on another student. What happens right now in the Quincy Public Schools when that happens?
Well, obviously, you're going to have them, they're going to have a conversation with either the star guide, with a counselor, or with the principal. And I will tell you right away, parents are contacted. Unfortunately, what we run into, and this is where I was talking again about student conduct, some parents take more responsibility in that than others. Some simply say, I'll support you. It was wrong what my child did, and let me see what I can do to assist you in making sure that it doesn't happen again. Then I run into the situation at the other end of the spectrum where it's simply, I have nothing to do with it. Do whatever you need to do. To the other end where it's simply, my child didn't do it. There's no way you can prove to me that my child did it. So they have to deal with all ranges of issues from the parents. What we're trying to do through our discipline code is to try to create some consistency K-12 to where at least if something happens at one school, it's pretty consistent with what happens at another school as far as discipline and everything else. So, excuse me. So what we're looking at is just simply, as I said, trying to provide that consistency among all of our schools.
Okay.
And I want to go back because you're absolutely right. In the time I've been here, I've noticed the same thing. I've always described the K-3 environment as being very nurturing. Being an elementary principal, I'd say warm and fuzzy. They come from the K-3, very small, close-knit, tight communities, and then they get thrust up on the Baldwin, and Baldwin has 1,500 students. What people forget, and I have to remind myself of this too when I get phone calls or emails, people never refer to our 3 schools at Baldwin. They only refer to it as Baldwin. It's never Baldwin West, North, or South. It's always just one school, but yet inside that school we have 3 buildings, and they, for the most part, operate as independent schools, but no one from the public realizes that it's still 3 schools. They look at it as just one school.
Do they take lunch together?
I think they actually, I'm not positive about that. I'll have to check and see if they
Do they
take
have
separate
recess
time.
together?
Yeah, I know.
I will describe to you, and I have to be careful because I give away confidences, but I've been a volunteer in the Quincy Public Schools for a long time. There's my little reward over there. You can look at it before you leave. I remember I said recently, one of my little charges was getting ready to graduate from 3rd grade. I said, oh, I bet you're excited about going to Baldwin. And of course they weren't, but that's more a loyalty to their old school.
Sure.
So then I talked with older sister who's in junior high. I said, oh, well, Susie Q will tell you that she didn't want to go to Baldwin either, but she did okay there. And the older sister piped up and said, it's not right what they do. They get us to love X elementary school, and they tell us everything's going to be okay at Baldwin. They could throw us in there, and she said, her words, 7th grader, it's a living hell. So I'm just relating to you what some people think, and I don't know what can be done about it. But they're just, when you lose that collegiality that you had K through 3, and you're with a whole bunch of other kids, and the bullies become even bigger, and the children who are timid become even more timid, it can become a problem. Again, going back to neighborhood schools would not eradicate all those problems, but would help immensely.
Well, Mary, you hit it on your very first question when we were discussing it. One thing to look at, and this will be a discussion with the board, is some type of restructuring. Do we look at elementaries being K-5 or K-6? And then you look at middle school concepts. You look at 9 through 12 at the high school. But then, again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It takes money. It takes, in order for us to restructure, it also may take new facilities. And that's one of those priorities, as we discussed with the board, that's going to have to come from that retreat.
9:31 our time. Our guest today is Stephen Cobb, Dr. Stephen Cobb, the new superintendent of schools for Quincy. He came to us from Indiana. If you'd like to join our conversation, 223-9300, 1-800-228-WTAD. We'd be happy to pass your comments along. So discipline continues to be a problem. Also, and of course, we booked this show before this, quote, incident came to light. I'm not surprised by this incident. I think a lot of people are aware that sometime in her lifetime, 1 out of every 4 women will have some kind of sexual assault perpetrated on them, and it's not unusual for that to happen on a place where a lot of young ladies gather, and that is the high school campus. What can be done to create a more safe environment for students, say at a senior high or a junior high level, where you do have they're starting to really become a differentiation in physical prowess. You know, really in the 3rd grade, the girls can beat up the boys pretty readily if they want to. That changes by senior year, and a lot of women feel very intimidated. I know we don't want to go into the particulars of this particular incident, but I think it's indicative of perhaps many things that are going on. What is your reaction to the charges of sexual assault at Quincy High?
Well, to start with, you're right. I can't go into details, and I really can't address that issue, other than I can say there are 2 sides to the story of which we can't share. I will tell you the one thing we're doing, though, we are adding 64 additional cameras, and I think you're going to see that as a commonplace among education in schools across the nation. You're going to see more cameras in place. You're going to see, unfortunately, it's one of those big brother is watching, just like in society. I think people would be shocked to see how many cameras or how many times you're actually caught on media, even driving down the street. The same thing's going to occur in our buildings. It is one of those where I think we're going to have more adult presence in the hallways. You're going to see a more adult presence and the video cameras itself. Would a video camera have prevented this alleged incident? I'm not sure. It just would have provided us additional information.
And I think it is unfortunate because this is not a topic for today's show. We have people like Quinata and sexual assault experts on. It is always going to be a he said, she said situation. I mean, this is the way it is in real life. I mean, this is the way it is all over. Anyone who's ever been assaulted knows that usually it's just the victim and the perpetrator. Mm-hmm. And they're the only 2 people who really knew what happened. And obviously, all you can do is try to guard against those things. Well, we have a caller who's waited patiently to get on board. You're with Dr. Stephen Cobb on the Mary Griffith Show. Speak up loud and clear, and what's your question?
Yes, good morning, Mary.
Good morning.
Dr. Cobb, I'm an old baby boomer, and when I was in high school, we had civics and public speaking, where the teachers divided us up into debating teams. And I believe it helped us quite a bit. Do you think it should be made mandatory for high school?
Good question. Now we're into curriculum issues. Yay! Segue to the next big topic, curriculum issues. The study of civics, the study of public speaking. Let's just talk about those 2 things specifically, and then we'll move to a more general curriculum discussion.
Well, first what I'm going to have to do, I do believe in the civics. As far as the public speaking, that's almost a life skill. We're going to have to go back, and part of my mission as superintendent will be also to reevaluate the programs that we have and we offer through Quincy. Some of it we really don't have a choice because they're mandated by the state. Other areas we have to look at and consider and evaluate whether or not those are appropriate for our students and also for our community. And those are 2 areas we're going to have to look at. You were going to ask me, Mary, also about some immediate goals that I have. One is which leads into this also, is I've got to, I have to fill some very important positions in central office. I've lost quite a bit of the central office staff out there by myself right now, and hopefully within the next few weeks we're going to be able to fill those positions, and I'm going to have a director of elementary curriculum and a director of secondary curriculum on board. At that point in time, I would hope that sometime in the future you may actually entertain having both of them all at the same time.
I would be happy to.
And address some of those curricular issues. But we are going to have to go back and reevaluate what we're offering and what's appropriate. I've had a very serious conversation with John Letts at John Wood, looking at dual credit. And how can our students at Quincy High School get additional dual credit for college? I want to see our students. Not necessarily would I aspire to a 4-year degree, absolutely. Would I love to see the kids at Quincy get a 2-year degree? Absolutely. I would like to see them get some type of post-high school education. I've had a very serious discussion with our mayor and trying to look in the back to the discipline question of what we can do from the mayoral's office, and he's going to actually, in communication, be providing someone from his office to serve on our discipline committee. So we're reaching out. Met with many of the church leaders. I have one coming up next week, I believe. And so we're making those contacts, but as far as curricular, I hope that in the future, Mary, you'll have people back who will address some of those issues also.
We do want to talk about Common Core, and so we will have to take a break because we have to get to our farm markets, but I would like to set the stage. You talk about curriculum, reading and writing and arithmetic, getting back to the basics, but of course, our students don't need just basic skills. They do need those, but they need so much more. Keyboarding and computers and everything else. And how are you even going to administer a test that's given by a computer when you don't have enough computers for every student to take the test in a timely fashion? So there are a lot of challenges facing not only Quincy Public Schools, but every public school in our area. And we're going to talk about those today. Your phone calls are welcome. Dial now. You'll be our first callers up when we return at Talk Radio 930 WTAD. That number is 223-9300. We'll break now for our morning market report from the Ursa Farmers Cooperative.
So what is the more in Doors and More?
Sunrooms! Stop the mosquitoes and their winged and crawling friends with your SunSpace 3-season sunroom from Doors & More. The telescoping 4-track window system allows you to convert your existing screen porch into a 3-season room and enjoy the outdoors regardless of the wind, rain, or even the sun. Or Doors & More can install your new sunroom on your existing porch, deck, or from the ground up. Call us for a free no-obligation quote at 22 Doors or come see our beautiful showroom on South 36th Street. Doors & More. What's the more? Windows!
At State Street Bank, a lot's changed since 1890. But one thing has remained the same: our commitment to the community we serve. That means over a century of helping local businesses, large and small, open their doors to our community. It means helping families find a place to call their own. State Street Bank has been trusted for over a century, and that means everything to us.
We're the bank that has and will continue to make it all happen.
Why don't others offer zero-turn riders with steering wheel control and four-wheel steering? Who else puts electronic power steering in lawn and garden tractors? How many others deliver the beautiful Cub Cadet signature cut? Prove to yourself what makes Cub Cadet the smartest choice. Take a test drive at your local dealer. There's no better time to get a Cub Cadet with smart financing options and incredible deals. Visit your local dealer today to see what makes Cub Cadet the smartest choice.
Imagine your world without glasses or contacts. Discover what LASIK can do for you. Call IEC for your free LASIK consultation. LASIK, your vision is our focus. International Eye Care Center.
In the past, everyone came to you and you did business at your own kitchen table.
This is Financial Services Representative Michael Libman with MetLife in Quincy. I still make house calls even with the internet and email. I feel it's important to really get to know you and your family's needs. Otherwise, how will I know what direction you need to take? Call me and I'll come sit with you at your kitchen table.
MetLife offers financial services and life insurance. Call Michael Libman. He makes house calls. Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, New York, New York, 10166.
is for the only one I see. Me is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore. And love was made for me and you.
So what is the more in Doors and More?
Sunrooms! Stop the mosquitoes and their winged and crawling friends with your SunSpace 3-season sunroom from Doors & More. The telescoping 4-track window system allows you to convert your existing screen porch into a 3-season room and enjoy the outdoors regardless of the wind, rain, or even the sun. Or Doors & More can install your new sunroom on your existing porch, deck, or from the ground up. Call us for a free no-obligation quote at 22 Doors or come see our beautiful showroom on
Dr. Stephen Cobb is my guest today. Baptism by fire, taking phone calls here on WTAD. We have a caller who's waited through the break to get in. Good morning. You're on the air. What's your comment or question for Dr. Cobb?
Well, good morning. I did a study with Dr. Lemon a couple of years ago, and I used all the statistics from the state website on the school reports. And the highest correlation to the school performance is attendance, which is something that people hardly ever talk about in order to prove our school performance. And I was wondering if you would ever run into this before, or would be willing to work on, improving the attendance, which obviously, if kids don't show up to school, it hurts what they're learning, and is probably also a reflection of a lot of the other problems.
Absolutely. Very thoughtful question. Can he respond now? Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. That is a great, thoughtful question. Good question, because it goes back to discipline in classroom and coming to school prepared. You have to come to school. You have to get to school. So should parents be held responsible for truant children, and should there be serious consequences beyond the student for non-attendance?
And see, that's interesting that you mentioned that. And this is a very good question because, again, that's where we're working with the mayor's office and our student discipline committee, that we're taking serious looks at, as I said, about making parents more responsible. And, caller, you're absolutely right. We're required to have students in school for 176 days out of the school year in Illinois. It saddens me, truly saddens me, when we have students that are out multiple days. And when I'm saying multiple days, I look at some of the records and I see students are out 30, 40, 50 plus days of school. You can't tell me that we can replace any of that learning, that every day that they're missing, they're losing instruction. And it's very difficult to say, let me put it this way. When you've got a first or a second grader and the parents aren't taking the responsibility of sending their student to school, I can pretty much predict what's going to happen to that student when they become an adult. Because if there is a pattern established over the years in their 12, 13 years of schooling, and they haven't been attending school, there is going to be an impact, and then that impact becomes societal, and it's also going to impact the future of Quincy. So it is an issue, and I'm glad you brought that up about attendance. I would love for every student to be there every day. Now, there's another catch to this, too. And that other part is it's a very fine balance of how we have to provide professional development for our teachers, because nothing against substitutes. They do a wonderful job. But it's also, when you have a substitute in that classroom, we also have to make sure that the instruction continues and the quality is the same or similar to when the classroom teacher's there. That's going to be very challenging, though, when you've got an instructor there for 176 days and they do get sick and they do have situations where teachers can't be there, and we do provide professional development during the day. So it's kind of a fine balance. It's one thing having the child there, but it's also us being there as educators as well.
That was a great question. It goes back to discipline. It goes back to the Common Core. Here's kind of a tough question, and I'm asking a question. I don't necessarily agree with my own question, but it costs about $8,000, $8,500 a year to educate the, quote, average student. Just a run-of-the-mill kid walks in the front door, $8,500 later, you've educated him. Then comes Nasty McNasty, and you've got about 20 grand sunk into them to sit them in a special classroom, have a guard there watching them, have a teacher who's afraid to turn her back to write on the blackboard because God knows if he has his scissors, he might come after her with it. It costs about 20 grand to put him in juvie a year or two. Is it just, are you the farm team for the juvenile justice system in some respects at Quincy High? Because we want, nobody wants to get kicked out of school. We have in-school suspension now so we can keep getting our state aid. And I mean, really, when you look at talking about crunching budget numbers, No Child Left Behind, keeping all the amount of money spent on some children would boggle the average person's mind. I mean, if they really sat down and looked at the school board budget and said, why in the world is this line item so high to educate so few kids? It's all boils down to academic poor performance and discipline. We keep going back to those same problems over and over. It is shocking what we spend on some children, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And I have to ask you, Mary, because I don't have the data in front of me, to your knowledge, what does the state of Illinois currently spend on prison inmates for our prison system?
Oh, it's probably about $20,000 to $25,000 per year minimum.
Right. I mean, think about that.
That's what I'm saying. Are we just
sad?
The farm team? You know, we're spending between probably 15 and 20 on some kids, maybe 10 to 15 on others. We're almost the farm team for the juvenile system, because if we can rescue them and they can matriculate and they can graduate and they can have their behavior changed, all the better. But if it's just not that way, then after they are released from the Quincy Public Schools, they will soon be recaptured by somebody else wearing a police uniform. So there is an intriguing cycle that goes around there.
Well, there is. And the other side of this, we have to remember how you're addressing this right now is you're looking at students that are leaving our schools, and I'll use for no other term to say, you said about the farm team. Well, in today's society, unfortunately, it's not necessarily the farm team are the ones sometimes committing the crimes. We have excellent students that go through our schools, and something changes in their life,
right,
and all of a sudden, you know, you sit back and you do have those stories where you've got the first grade teacher saying, well, I knew him in first grade, he or she, you know, I knew this was going to happen. And then on the other side, you have those first grade teachers or any educator who's been in that kid's life, and they're saying, I am stunned. I never would have believed that they were capable of doing this. So it's very difficult to try to find that balance, and you don't want to prejudge kids. What you want to do is you mention the word, and that's called save them as much as you can.
And that's part of the problem, too, in a lot of people in small towns. And Quincy is a small town.
Yes.
They do say, well, my brother was a bad seed, so I'm getting the runoff when we have the same first grade teacher. But there has to be some effort to treat each child with individual respect. Dr. Stephen Cobb, my guest today, we've talked about some problems, discipline and dress codes and things like that. Let's talk about your vision. Let's turn it to the good now. What bright, shining hope do you bring? What would you like to see happen in the next 12 months, 24 months, that kind of thing? What's your game plan? And, of course, the board has to be on board with you, but what's the game plan?
Well, the game plan is people have to understand, as I said before, this is a journey. This is not going to be a quick fix. I wish I could come in here and wave a magic wand and straighten everything out, but that really doesn't work that way. This is going to be a journey that's going to have to be laid out over 5-10 years and how we're going to progress forward as a district. The 7 members are extremely important in this, and as I've said before, I'm very excited about our retreat coming up. We're going to be able to set the priorities. I think we are going to have to look at restructuring our schools as a possibility. We may have to have some infrastructure repairs. We may have new facilities. We're also looking at, as I mentioned earlier, about the 21st century, and you said something about Common Core. We're going to have to look at technology. What type of technology can we offer for our students to prepare them for the upcoming world changes? So it is going to be a bright future for us in Quincy. It's just that I tease the board because I have a list of about 38 items that I want to discuss with them, and I just need some prioritizing for myself from them and some direction on where we're going next. But in the meantime, in the last 5 weeks, it's been building, as short-term goals, building that central office staff, conducting interviews, getting my feet wet, getting to get to know everyone within the community. And I can't express enough, I appreciate the board bringing me and allowing me to come in early, which happened to be on April 15th, tax day, but bringing me early so I can get this base before we move forward.
Well, the new broom may sweep clean, as they say. There has been a wholesale turnover at the administration of the Quincy Public Schools. So folks who said it was all the administration's fault about the Quincy Public Schools, well, you'll either be justified or wrong here in a year or two. You mentioned facilities. The citizens of Quincy have been loath to really vote any kind of tax increase money into the Quincy Public Schools. And I think we have a pretty fine school system here. The vast majority of students that I know, of course, are great achievers. They have forward-thinking goals. They want things out of their life. They want to achieve. They want to go forward. Facilities are so critical and so important, especially if you go back to a neighborhood school, whatever that means, to whatever, however you define that, you are going to have to make some wholesale changes. Can these changes be made without a vote of the people to raise tax revenue in Quincy?
I don't believe so. I think it is going to have to be a referendum. We're going to have to take a serious look, and that's part of the board discussion again. The public's going to have to be involved in this process, and it is a multi-step process. It's not simply 7 board members or myself saying this is what we need to do. It doesn't work that way. It will be a vote of the public. We're going to have to look at raising bonds, et cetera, in a referendum, and that will be unveiled as we establish our priorities, and then that communication will begin with the public. I've been in all of our buildings several times. They are beautiful buildings.
They're well maintained. I mean, the janitorial staff
Very
is
much
the
so.
shining beacon on the hill.
Oh, they take so much pride in their buildings.
I mean, you can eat off the floor in a lot of these,
Yes, you can.
a lot of these schools, and when you think about the traffic they get, it really is quite amazing. So things are looking great. You come into a situation where, well, first of all, it's never been that way. You'll hear a lot of that. Or when I was a kid, we walked to school uphill and both ways, and came home. And times they are changing. And to keep kids ready for today's marketplace, it's rather intriguing. In Quincy here, despite the fact there was a lot of talk about jobs in our last mayoral election, the real problem is not the lack of jobs, the lack of qualified people to fill those jobs. We just simply are not churning out locally enough people that can put together a sentence that will require them to ask if they want fries with that burger. And that's really becoming quite noticeable, that those who are achieving are getting ahead at a much rapid rate. Those who are falling behind at a more rapid rate. The gap is widening. This poverty gap seems to be widening in our community. Children trapped in poverty because their parents can't seem to get out of poverty for whatever reason, and that maybe the parents partially their own fault, quote unquote. But this is really comes difficult when you're trying to teach kids about forward-thinking goals when they don't really have much to model in their own home.
That's true. That goes back to your question about students coming to school and what type of environment. You protect them and educate them for 7-8 hours a day, but you can't really address the home environment. It's also very frustrating when you're trying to get parents involved in their child's life at school. They don't participate. It's a very fine line of how much and how forceful you are as an educator, and you cross that line sometimes to where you have parents get quite upset with you because you're now invading their space. But yet, every day it happens in all of our classrooms. I know I have very dedicated teachers that are out working closely with parents, and administrators are getting students and parents involved in their schools almost every day.
Let's talk a little bit about some people have a lack of trust in the Quincy Public Schools, and I'll bring up like a perfect example, and maybe the media is at fault here for not communicating this better. We hear the edict comes down, lack of funding, no bus trips for Quincy Public School students, no bus trips for Quincy Public School students. Folks like myself that volunteer at different agencies that have always hosted little come and see what the John Wood Mansion looks like, come and see what the Quincy Community Theater looks like, enjoy a show. We bristle at this. We think, wow, this is such an important part of education to get out of the classroom. But yet, there are bus trips going on. I happen to know this for a fact, that the St. Louis Zoo has been visited by Quincy Public School students, that Scotty's Funland has been visited by Quincy Public School System. Why do you make, not you, but why do they make a statement that there's not going to be any field trips, and then kids are going on field trips all over the place?
Well,
that's part of a trust issue, isn't it?
It is, and I agree with you, and that's why also I'm very excited about our 2 directors coming on board, our 2 directors of curriculum, because we're going to take a serious look at what is out there, what opportunities, and I've had several people in the community make that same comment that you did. Why aren't we visiting some of our local museums, et cetera? That's going to be one of our challenges. We do have to look at that. Some of these things we have to take a look at. Part of the funding aspect is, you're right, we're always going to say in education there's never enough funds, which I have to agree. However, I think we need to be more creative with some of our funding if the state allows us that flexibility. And I think we have to take a look at every program and reevaluate it, as I said, and transportation is one of those. I remember the days, as you do, when we used to walk places and attend different field trips, but it wasn't necessarily by a bus, it was by walking. Then we also had, where it wasn't an option, we go down someplace and we always had that transportation available. So we're going to have to take a serious look at what opportunities we have, but I think it's one of those, when you talk about trust, it is one of those opportunities as we have our school-age children participate in our local agencies and museums, et cetera, that it does help build that trust.
I just want to go on record as saying we did have more phone callers than we let on the air, but folks, when you call the Mary Griffith Show, you just can't yell at me in my ear. You have to actually say something to the superintendent of schools. So I'm sorry I couldn't carry on a long conversation with you while I'm live on the air. But we will hopefully have this gentleman back, and you will call, and you'll be on the air, and you'll behave yourself. So maybe we can talk about discipline issues with our with our callers. I do want to give you this last chance. We're down to about the last minute or two of the show. What would you like the people of Quincy to know? Those who do not have any connection to the schools except they pay the taxes. They don't have students in the schools anymore. They don't even have grandkids in the schools anymore. They have no connection to the Quincy Public School except the check they write in June. What would you like them to know about the public schools?
You know, and that's true. I'm glad you mentioned that, Mary, because number one, we have to have pride in our schools. Number two, even though they write that check, in order for Quincy to be viable as a thriving community, you need to have good schools. You need to have great schools. And we're heading in that direction. And I think the 70%ers, the people that don't have children in schools, they need to know and have a great deal of pride, which in the community I've seen so far, they do have pride in the schools. It's just the next step of where they have pride in the schools, where we have newer facilities and we're giving opportunities for students to get ready for that 21st century. This is a tough marketplace. This is not like when I went to school and when I graduated from high school and graduated from college. The world has changed. Years ago, they talked about a global economy. This is truly a global economy. This is no longer Quincy, Illinois, that we can just operate within the world of our own. Kids are competing against everyone else across the world, and we have to make sure that we've prepared them for that. And part of that is, as I said, the 70%ers that don't have students in our schools, this impacts you because this is going to bring those dollars back into Quincy. This is going to attract businesses coming back into Quincy. So you do need to have a great school system to support it.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen Cobb. His first appearance, but not his last, I hope, on the Mary Griffith Show, and we'll continue to follow the schools as it progresses. You can hear it later on podcast, right here on WTAD, or watch this interview on QuincyJournal.com. This is WTAD Quincy, Hannibal Keokuk.
Install your new sunroom on your existing porch, deck, or from the ground up. Call us for a free no-obligation quote at 22 Doors, or come see our beautiful showroom on South 36th Street. Doors and more. What's the more? Windows!
At State Street Bank, a lot's changed since 1890. But one thing has remained the same: our commitment to the community we serve. That means over a century of helping local businesses, large and small, open their doors to our community. It means helping families find a place to call their own. State Street Bank has been trusted for over a century, and that means everything to us.
We're the bank that has and will continue to make it all happen.
Why don't others offer zero-turn riders with steering wheel control and four-wheel steering? Who else puts electronic power steering in lawn and garden tractors? How many others deliver the beautiful Cub Cadet signature cut? Prove to yourself what makes Cub Cadet the smartest choice. Take a test drive at your local dealer. There's no better time to get a Cub Cadet with smart financing options and incredible deals. Visit your local dealer today to see what makes Cub Cadet the smartest choice.
Imagine your world without glasses or contacts. Discover what LASIK can do for you. Call IEC for your free LASIK consultation. LASIK, your vision is our focus. International Eye Care Center.
In the past, everyone came to you and you did business at your own kitchen table.
This is Financial Services Representative Michael Libman with MetLife in Quincy. I still make house calls, even with the internet and email. I feel it's important to really get to know you and your family's needs. Otherwise, how will I know what direction you need to take? Call me and I'll come sit with you at your kitchen table.
MetLife offers financial services and life insurance. Call Michael Libman. He makes house calls. Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, New York, New York, 10166.
L is for the way you look at me. O is is for the only one I see. Lee is very, very extraordinary. He is even more than anyone that you adore, and love was made